Another live action, okay, but not in the traditional sense. This is an original live action prequel to the 2019 adaptation of The Lion King, a movie that made a lot of money. So in terms of profitability, you can understand why the big studio execs choose to expand upon or adapt already existing IPs rather than focusing purely on originality, to the anger of many people, which is common practice now. You know, movie is announced, it's a live action adaptation, nobody wanted it. So these movies aren't going to go anywhere anytime soon, which is why I've taken up the point of view that while I agree there is no need for them, as long as they keep coming, I might as well try to maximize my enjoyment out of them rather than hating before I've even had the chance to watch it. And that kind of holds even more true with Mufasa, which is a unique case given it's not directly adapted from a 2D animated movie, so there's supposedly a bit more leeway with its story, so why not go into it with an open mind? It opens with not Mufasa, but Simba, who is on his way to Nala, who is about to give birth to a certain future leader of the Lion Guard, and little Kiara is left in the care of Timon and Pumbaa, who for whatever reason decide that this movie is their time to shine. And in actuality, Rafiki is the one who watches over her by telling her a story about her grandfather, one of the great kings of the past, even though from this movie's perspective he is the first and only great king of the past. In the Pride Lands at least. But anyway, this is a story about Mufasa. I'm a fan of this opening, and I would have liked it even more if we didn't cut back to this scene at multiple points throughout the movie. So to the past, Mufasa is a single cub born to his parents, living in a barren land where rain has not fallen in a long time. And if you are a Lion King fan, you'll know that Mufasa was not an only child and had a biological brother, Scar, or Taka. So this change it's a letdown for me. But we move on, and if you're one of those actually people who thinks otherwise because that's not how lion prides work in real life, let me stop you there. My sister is one of those people. She loves big cat nature documentaries, and whenever she gets the chance, she'll say something like, you know, Simba and Nala are actually related because this and that, and how that works in real life. The topic of realism is not really relevant here, because explain to me why the entire savannah is gathered around an elevated rock that a king lion is standing on the edge of as they bow down to him, instead of minding their own business as a monkey holds up his newborn son to the sun. Anyway, my first thought after seeing Mufasa was an only child was that this prequel would only be canon to the 2019 movie and not the original, and maybe there was some changes in that adaptation that I just missed, although later on that does not seem to be the case. Mufasa's parents did seem nice, not quite the same situation as him being the heir to the kingdom as in the original, at least I'm pretty sure that's how it was. But again, the movie goes on. They tell him about a place called Milele, the prophesized land which would become known as the Pride Lands, and we don't spend much time here before a flood sweeps Mufasa away to a faraway place to be found by Taka. Taken in by this new pride, begrudgingly he and Taka quickly become inseparable, because one thing you should know is that Taka always wanted a brother. I said I went into it open-minded. My mind was closed ever so slightly before the movie even began, because while waiting in the cinema, my sister showed me a clip of one of the songs, the Brother song, which I already knew about thanks to the trailers, but she shows me this video while laughing to herself, and it's that part of the song, you know exactly the part I'm talking about. And from the trailers, I already had a bit of a worry because of the vocal performances, but even though they weren't sitting right with me, I wasn't going to judge purely based on the trailer. I mean, there's another movie that came out last year that proved exactly why that is a bad idea. And while on the topic, the other songs in this movie, obviously there is Lin-Manuel Miranda, very well known, very good at his job. I know next to nothing about him. I barely know anything about music as it is. As in, if you want a breakdown about what makes music good or bad, the tempo, melody, key or whatever, I'm not the guy to do that. So all I can say is that the songs in this movie were okay for me. I wouldn't call any of them outright bad, but I won't say any of them were any special as well. Maybe someone more knowledgeable has an entirely different opinion to me, but it's not a soundtrack that I'm going to be actively listening to over and over again. Back on track, Mufasa spends most of his days with the lionesses, where he picks up skills from his time spent with them, like during hunting while the males lounge in the shade. So the king of the Pride Lands that we knew was the king, if that makes sense. Like, up until his death, Mufasa felt invincible, or at least to me that's how he felt in the original movie. And I love that kind of purely good character, specifically one with strength or in a leadership role, because if you were to imagine what you would do if you were the strongest, or if you were in a position of power, you'd like to think that you'd only work for the greater good, purely good intentions, or at least I'd hope you would. In this movie, it's clear Mufasa is better, stronger, more capable, more courageous, bigger, of purer heart than Scar, and I like that. He is superior to Scar in every way, which includes the skills he learned from the lionesses, but he holds none of that over anyone. He has no ill intentions. To overgeneralize, I've always preferred the Supermans over the Batmans, so it's not as much a compliment for the Mufasa movie as it is for the original where he was given his characterization, but I think this movie did well in keeping him as him for the most part. And talking about courageousness, the main villains of this movie are a pride of white lions who don't really amount to much in the end at all, really. And the thing is, I would have been okay with that if they had served as a vehicle for Scar's turn, which they kind of did, but not really. Although they did set the tone with him running away instead of helping Mufasa and his mother. Scar is undeniably what makes or breaks the movie. Even though Mufasa is the titular character, his development was always going to be much more straightforward, while Scar's would be, or should have been, more layered given the path that they chose to go down with him, but we'll get to that later. These other lions are taking over the land by taking out other lion prides, with Scar's or Taka's father's pride being the last one, and in an attempt to save the bloodline, he sends Mufasa and Scar away, who go on a journey to Milele while meeting some familiar faces. First comes the pair of Zazu and Sarabi, and with them comes the next inconsistency. Remember when I said that I thought this movie was only canon to the 2019 adaptation? Turns out that doesn't make much sense either, because in that movie is this line.
Don't be too hard on him, sire. I remember a cub, a certain headstrong cub, who was always getting into scrapes, and he achieved some prominence. Did he not, sire?
How could Zazu have known Mufasa as a cub when he first met him as an adolescent, unless Zazu is mistaking him for another lion and is low-key a lion racist? To be honest, I might be a lion racist because I also got confused between Mufasa and Scar at a couple points during the movie. Anyway, Zazu is still witty. Sometimes I enjoyed it, sometimes it seemed like the movie was trying too hard. And then we have Sarabi, who is the true source of conflict in this movie, which is the rift between Mufasa and Scar. I do not like love triangles. These kinds of subplots where romance acts as a point of division between two friends or whatever, it's one of those things where I can't think of another example, but I know there are loads of other movies that do this, and I know there's much more to it than Scar just not getting the girl, but it does get a lot of focus. There's also Rafiki. I liked Rafiki in this movie, although I do wish he was a bit more whimsical, and I also do wish we got to see a bit more of him and Scar interacting, what with their mutual brotherly link, I guess, to Mufasa. So now to Scar himself. His whole character is built around his own insecurities, from the time in his pride where he saw Mufasa bonding with his mother, to him saving his mother and his father trying to cover it up, to everything Mufasa did to help him gain Sarabi's favor. If I was to take this movie in isolation, this seems much more serviceable than if I were to include the context of the original. Scar's own faults leading to his own downfall, okay, but even then it felt disjointed. I mean, while I won't fault them for not trying, since you can see that they were planting the seeds for his flip, the flip itself felt like being hit with a brick wall. His insecurities are suddenly gone, and he's suddenly talking and acting more like the scheming Scar we know. And to change the dynamic where he is in fact the true heir, just to add a bit more of a grey area, is that necessary? To make him more sympathetic, is there a reason that we need to make him more sympathetic? A lot of my issues in this movie stem from the changes that they decided to make, the big changes like Mufasa and Scar's respective origins, the Pride lands and such. Did they make the changes because they thought the story would be better for it, or did they make the changes because they didn't do their research and thought they could do whatever? Even Milele, this place called Milele, it had no ruling lions before Mufasa, which is why it wasn't called the Pride lands. But even once Mufasa did become king, was there a reason that he would change the name after the fact? For a place whose name means forever, if that name was changed to something else, then it didn't last forever. And one more thing with Mufasa, I said I liked him for the most part, but would Mufasa really lie about such things just to make Scar look better in front of Sarabi? Again, he had no ill intentions, but he was lying, and surely you'd think, or well, I would think that he knew what the repercussions of this could be. Or was he that gung-ho on helping Scar that he was blind to his faults? That seems kind of dumb. But the thing I did not like the most about this movie, the cuts back to the present with Timon and Pumbaa just taking me out of the moment entirely, every single time. Either the unnecessary comedy after a tense scene or breaking the fourth wall, just you didn't need to do that. And it's not like, you didn't need to do that. It's more like, you really did not need to do that. The soundtrack, I got goosebumps whenever that classic orchestral theme played, like when Rafiki saw his tree for the first time, or the final scene of Mufasa roaring to the sky. That final scene was probably the easiest one to get right, just have Mufasa triumphant with some link back to the present day, and they managed just that with Kiara roaring to the sky as well. That's a scene that I will happily rewatch over and over. But also the scene where Mufasa rallies the Pride Lands, I thought that was an amazing scene, and the OST was great. This movie has some nice stuff in isolation as well as some not so nice stuff, and with some of the story changes it did make it loses that safety cushion of the original, since it's now more disconnected and more vulnerable to criticism, if you know what I mean. But weirdly enough, it is a movie that I think I will go back and rewatch despite its flaws. It's a movie that at the end of the day is really, I think, only going to be remembered as a shining example of why such live action movies shouldn't be made, but it's already grossed around, well, almost $500 million at the global box office. So be prepared, because there's gonna be loads more of these to come.